This is just a short video trying to show you a fairly standard green machine. There have been a few modifications to it. Right now it has the standard case feeder that handles everything from 380 up to 44 Magnum. First designed for 38 special, and that's what it has in it now. And each vertical holds about 17 cases, 15 to 17. And of course, when you want to start or whatever, you just rotate it one click and you see the cases fell down. Alright, now I don't particularly like this thing because it's real easy to get a case in it upside down. If you have a, let's say, a 9mm or something, or maybe an M1 carbine shell that gets mixed in with brass you're not watching, you really have to take it all apart. You have to remove the set screw here, pull the whole thing out. Of course, all the cases fall on the floor, and etc. But anyway, but that's standard. Down below, you'll see the little primer catcher. That's standard. Now I'll get into the slight modifications. Okay, the first one is the actual primer feeder. The original one that came with it is gone. The best thing you can do with those whenever you get one is throw them away. And inside of this, that's a standard Dillon primer tube. Okay, and you can get either the pickup tube or the one that goes inside their press, and it does the same job. However, this is the first time I ever used one of these. This is my first green machine, and I've already sold 8 of them. This is my last one. But anyway, this simply goes in, a set screw locks it, and I built a blast shield that goes around it, just like Dillon has. And I've never, in probably the hundreds of thousands of rounds I've loaded on those 9 green machines, had a stack explosion. That won't say that it won't happen. But anyway, what it does is it diverts the explosion upward and away from you into the ceiling of your loading room. I will say that Green Machine has a very safe primer transfer method, to where it just comes out and picks up one primer, and the only thing that could possibly happen to make your stack explosion is when you dump 100 of them down, when they come crashing down to the bottom. But like I said, I've never had a problem like that. So anyway, the original primer dispenser has been removed and thrown away. Has a Dillon primer tube in it, blast shield on it, and this is something else I did. This is just a piece of brass brazing rod, and I soldered on top an empty 38 special. It's a follower, and I've never needed it. You really don't need it, but it does tell you when you're getting close to being out of primers, running up and down. Okay, now another modification is these little dandy powder rotors. Powder dispensers have a habit of the hopper down here at the bottom cracking. Just old age, and they get a crack in them, and one day you could take the lid off, and the next thing you know, when you take the lid off, the whole thing falls off and powder gets all over. So I machined a thin aluminum wall piece that goes on, and so this is just as rigid as can be, and I've never had a powder hopper crack after I put one of those on. It probably does, but you just don't know it. Okay, one other modification is this movable bullet drop piece here. You can see it's very shiny. 25-30 years ago, I put that in the lathe and radiused it to give it an easier path for the bullet to drop in. The originals weren't radiused much. Okay, next modification. Down here, I'm not sure how well you can see that, but let me see if I can zoom in here just a little bit. All right, that's a 1/4 20 cap screw with a nut down below it. And what that does is when you pull this lever down and are seating your bullet to its final depth, it's a stop that keeps it more consistent, meaning that the presses have quite a bit of movement in the press heads, and if you get some really tough military brass that's a little thicker, then when you try to do a crimp on it over here and seat the bullet, it'll be off maybe 10-15 thousandths. But this is always tension to give you a little pressure on it. All right, so as you see, it's starting to step cases over. All right, so that's been added. Let's see, what else? I think that's pretty much the changes. Okay, now the one thing I always liked about this press, and it's near impossible to see it, but the diameter, they made these presses with a couple different diameters of the posts that the upper head runs up and down on, and this is lucky enough it's one of the ones that have a larger diameter set of posts back here, meaning that there's more rigidity for this upper head going up and down. So with all that said, we'll run a few empty cases through it. Now, I'm not going to bother loading them. I'm going to step some cases through, and that'll be it for now. All right, here we're back, and we're simply, like I said, we're just going to step some empty cases through it, and I'll try to. This is how I have this, had them set up on it. This is all on a Lazy Susan, so the 9 presses could all use the same Dillon case feeder. But anyway, as you step this thing through, it moves them over. Let me get this out of my way. And I haven't engaged the powder rotor, but of course the second one dumps the powder. The way I have this set up is that when I drop the lead projectile in here, I do not make this station actually seat it to full depth, because one of the weakest links on this machine is this station, and there's 2 links here that you will break, especially if you stack by mistake 2 bullets on top of each other, meaning that when you drop the first projectile in, somebody disturbs you, you come back out and you throw the second projectile in because you can't see the first one, and you pull the lever and you'll try to cram 2 of them in the case, and this will break. So by just barely seating it with this and starting the bullet straight, and you let this multi-purpose die seat it to its final depth and crimp it, or whatever type crimp you're using. Okay, anyway, back over we go, and well, of course there's no there's no bullets in these things, so they're gonna fall out all over the place. But anyway, you get the idea. They just step right on through, and with every pull you get a loaded round after you get your rhythm started. Okay, and we're done. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this tube assembly off, because like I said, I don't really care for them, because a lot of times when you rotate them, they got a little detent in the bottom and they don't really line up correctly. It's hard for me to load them, so let me change a couple things and we'll be back. All right, here we're back, and what we've done is took off the original tube carousel that came with it and installed a bracket, this metal bracket here. It's got an arm that goes back to one of the bolts, cap bolts, that holds the upper press support in place. It uses the same pin that holds a normal carousel in place, But I am including one more of the actual plastic base pieces. So anyway, then the tube is one of the original tubes, and it simply slides down through this into the plastic black part and stops. So it has a melmeline, will make you dizzy. It has a melmeline bowl up here on top that simply lifts off, and you can see this is a solid brass piece, another piece of brass turned, and it's silver soldered together. So anyway, it simply slides on top like so. Make sure it seats down, and the way you use this is just grab a handful of brass, throw it in here, and then shake the bowl. And the brass simply falls down. And after you get the tube full the first time, just bump it while you're reloading it. In fact, most of the time the movement of the press will be enough to make them go on down. Now the nice part about this is that they always go down base first. So you can see up in here, when you shake it, it falls in, I guess you can see it, base first. So anyway, I'm not going to bore you with a bunch of other information on the press because everything else is exactly the same. So if you don't like this setup, you simply unscrew one set screw here and pull the cap screw out back here and take my adapter off, and you can put the regular back in place. I'm also going to include, this is a short drop tube that was in here, and when I had that set up on my Dillon case feeder, there was one of those on each one of the green machines, and you simply rotated it around, and that was it. So I will sign off for right this minute, and I'm going to get together a few other things to show you that's going to come with it. Okay, my short video turned into something quite a bit longer than I expected. But anyway, here's the extra stuff that comes with this fully functional green machine. So you get a complete little dandy charge assembly. It's one of the newer ones. It's the shorter one that doesn't take the screw and adapter. With it, it's got a number 2 rotor that I used to dispense 3 grains of bullseye when I was shooting 90 grain bullets for 380. Okay, so it's got the number 2 rotor, and it has the cam that goes on the back of it and everything. So it's a complete assembly. Then it comes with a total of 9 rotors. Now all the rotors have been cut off in the front, so there's no knob hanging out in your way. And by the way, that's a tough thing to do because they're hardened. And that's so you can use the Dillon primer feed assembly so it clears. Now those rotors include a 2, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 15, and then 1 is adjustable. And it worked okay. And it's simply down inside, I don't know if you can see it, but inside of there's an Allen headed set screw that you can back up and down to create slightly different charges. But that's just a gimme. Okay, and then of course the tube assembly, the original tube assembly, the one I had set up for the Dillon, a brand new primer flip tray that I never used, of course. Then this is a case feeder base assembly. This is the piece that goes on the left-hand side of the machine and stands up where your case drop tube assembly fits on top. And this one is for a 44 Magnum or a 10 millimeter. And it's slightly different. It's bigger dimensions inside and slightly different dimensions for the height in here. Anyway, that has only been mounted on a machine, really not used. I set up a machine for somebody else and I put that on to get it set up. Also included our case retainer stud, which is the case retainers are the little plastic wipers that keep the shell casings from popping out. So there's a stud, there's three case retainer pieces in there, and there's either two fronts and one back or two backs and one front, one of the two. Here's a bullet plug that you can use on either a 9 millimeter or a 38 round nose bullet. RCBS chose to give them two numbers, but they're basically the same. And also comes with a 38 semi-wad cutter modified that actually seats the bullet a little further than a normal one. And I do that because I keep the bullet seater assembly set way high so the final die can do the actual seating and crimping. And then, not to make you dizzy, but I'm going to pan around, and here's, I think it's brand new cover for the RCBS. My press is set in an air-conditioned office, so they were never covered up. But anyway, hope that didn't bore you too bad with this long video. Thank you.